Harry Houdini, the legendary escape artist, left behind a legacy of mystery that extended even into his death. Before passing in the mid-1920s, Houdini made an unusual request to his wife Bess: hold an annual seance on Halloween, the anniversary of his death, to test whether he could communicate from beyond the grave. This wasn't a whimsical idea, it was a calculated challenge to the spiritualists he had spent years exposing as frauds. Houdini and Bess devised a secret code, known only to them, that would serve as proof of genuine contact. For 10 years, Bess honored his wish, but no medium ever revealed the code. After a decade, she famously declared, "10 years is long enough to wait for any man," and ended the tradition. However, a persistent myth claims that seances are still held in Houdini's name to this day. While some fans and magicians continue the tradition on Halloween, these gatherings are more about honoring his legacy than fulfilling his original challenge. Another myth surrounds Houdini's burial. Some believe he was interred in a bronze casket used in one of his escape acts, but this is false. The bronze casket, designed for an underwater escape stunt, was used to transport his body from Detroit to New York after his death, but it was not his final resting place. Houdini was buried in a traditional casket at Machpelah Cemetery in Queens, New York. Despite these myths, Houdini's grave remains a pilgrimage site for fans and magicians alike. Visitors leave broken handcuffs, locks, and other symbols of his life's work as tributes to the man who spent his career defying the impossible. Even in death, Houdini's name continues to evoke wonder, skepticism, and the enduring allure of the unknown. Spencer Tracy. Spencer Tracy, one of Hollywood's most celebrated actors, left behind a legacy of quiet dignity and a burial request that reflected his deeply private nature. When Tracy passed away in the late 1960s, he made it clear that he wanted no grand Hollywood spectacle or public funeral. Instead, he requested a small private service attended only by his closest family and friends. This decision, while consistent with his reserved personality, surprised many in the entertainment world, as Tracy was a towering figure of the golden age of Hollywood who had spent decades in the public eye. One of the most talked about aspects of Tracy's funeral was the absence of Katharine Hepburn, his longtime partner of over 25 years. Hepburn, who had shared a deeply personal and private relationship with Tracy, chose not to attend the funeral out of respect for his wishes and his family. Tracy, a devout Catholic, had remained married to his estranged wife, Louise Treadwell, until his death, and Hepburn later explained that her presence at the funeral might have caused discomfort to his family. Her decision, though deeply personal, added to the mystique surrounding their relationship, which had always been kept discreet during Tracy's lifetime. Tracy was laid to rest at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California, a cemetery known for its many famous residents. His grave, modest and unassuming, reflects his lifelong aversion to the trappings of fame. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Tracy's final resting place is a quiet tribute to his humility and his desire to separate his public persona from his private life. Even in death, Spencer Tracy remained true to himself, leaving behind a legacy of understated brilliance and quiet integrity that continues to inspire admiration. William S. Hart. William S. Hart, the silent film cowboy who helped define the Western genre, left behind a final wish that reflected his love for the Old West. When Hart passed away in the late 1940s, he requested to be buried on the grounds of his California estate in Newhall, which he had left to the public as a museum. His burial site, marked by a simple plaque, is located on a hill within the property, a quiet and fitting tribute to the man who brought the frontier to life on the silver screen. Hart's estate, now known as the William S. Hart Ranch and Museum, was his pride and joy. It features his mansion, Western art, Native American artifacts, and memorabilia from his film career. His will ensured that the estate would be preserved as a public park and museum, allowing future generations to experience the spirit of the Old West. However, legal disputes erupted after his death, with distant relatives challenging his will. These battles delayed the opening of the museum for several years, casting a shadow over his final wishes. Today, the museum stands as a testament to Hart's legacy, and his burial site remains a quiet part of the property. Visitors can pay their respects to one of Hollywood's first Western stars, whose love for the frontier shaped both his life and his final resting place. Bette Davis. Bette Davis, the indomitable star of Hollywood's golden age, ensured that her final resting place would reflect her sharp wit and unyielding spirit. When Davis passed away in the late 1980s, she was buried in Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Los Angeles, but it was her epitaph that captured the world's attention. Engraved on her tombstone are the words, "She did it the hard way." This phrase, chosen by Davis herself, is a nod to her reputation as a fiercely independent woman who fought for creative control and respect in an industry dominated by men. Davis chose to be buried alongside her mother, Ruthie, and her sister Bobby in a family plot. This decision reflected her deep connection to her family, despite the challenges in their relationships. Her mother had been a driving force in her early career, and Davis supported her sister, who struggled with mental health issues for much of her life. Her funeral, attended by notable figures such as Angela Lansbury, James Woods, and George Hamilton, was a significant event, but not an overly extravagant Hollywood spectacle. The epitaph on her grave became a lasting symbol of her legacy. It was a defiant statement from a woman who had battled studio executives, critics, and personal hardships to become one of the most respected actresses of her time. Even in death, Bette Davis refused to conform. Her grave, marked by her iconic epitaph, remains a pilgrimage site for fans who admire her resilience, talent, and unapologetic determination to do things her way, no matter the cost. John Barrymore. John Barrymore, the legendary actor of stage and screen, left behind a legacy of brilliance and a posthumous story as eccentric as the man himself. When Barrymore passed away in the early 1940s, his body was embalmed and buried at Calvary Cemetery in Los Angeles. However, the journey to his final resting place became the subject of one of Hollywood's most infamous legends. According to the tale, Barrymore's friends, including Errol Flynn and W.C. Fields, allegedly borrowed his body from the funeral home and propped it up in a chair at Flynn's house for a macabre prank. While this story has been widely circulated, it is almost certainly a myth. Flynn himself denied the incident in his autobiography, calling it a fabrication. Despite the lack of evidence, the story persists, adding to the mystique of Barrymore's larger-than-life persona. In the 1980s, Barrymore's son, John Drew Barrymore, had his remains moved from Calvary Cemetery to the family crypt at Mount Vernon Cemetery in Philadelphia. This relocation honored the Barrymore family's theatrical roots and their deep connection to Philadelphia, where their legacy began. Even in death, John Barrymore's life remains shrouded in myth and intrigue. His reputation as one of the greatest actors of his generation is matched only by the eccentric stories that followed him to the grave. Whether the tales are true or not, they serve as a fitting tribute to a man who lived and died larger than life. Cary Grant. Cary Grant, the epitome of Hollywood charm and sophistication, left behind a final wish that reflected his understated elegance and aversion to excess. When Grant passed away in the mid-1980s, he was cremated, and his ashes were retained by his family, as per his wishes. He did not want a traditional burial or a grand memorial service, choosing instead a private and unassuming farewell. This decision surprised many, as Grant was one of the most iconic stars of the golden age of Hollywood. Yet he rejected the elaborate tributes often associated with celebrities of his stature. Grant's final arrangements mirrored his personal philosophy. Despite his fame, he was known for his humility and his desire to live a life free from the trappings of Hollywood excess. In his later years, he retired from acting to focus on his family and personal happiness, stepping away from the spotlight that had defined much of his career. His decision to forgo a public funeral or a permanent gravesite was a continuation of this philosophy, ensuring that his legacy would live on through his work rather than through a physical monument. Adding to the poignancy of his passing, Grant died while on tour for his one-man show, A Conversation with Cary Grant. He had been preparing to take the stage in Davenport, Iowa, when he suffered a fatal stroke. His death was sudden, but his wishes for a private and unassuming farewell were carried out exactly as he had planned. Cary Grant's final arrangements reflect the man behind the legend: elegant, private, and deeply personal. Even in death, he remained true to himself, leaving behind a legacy of timeless charm and a reminder that simplicity can be the ultimate sophistication. Buster Keaton. Buster Keaton, the silent film legend known as the Great Stone Face, left behind a legacy of groundbreaking comedy and innovation. When Keaton passed away in early 1966, he was buried at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Hollywood Hills, California, in the Court of Valor section. His grave is marked by a simple plaque, reflecting the humility and unpretentiousness that defined his life. Keaton's later years were marked by a quiet resurgence in his career. After decades of being overlooked by Hollywood, he experienced a revival in the 1950s and 60s with younger filmmakers and audiences rediscovering his genius. He appeared in films, television shows, and commercials, and in 1960 he received an Academy Honorary Award for his contributions to cinema. Despite this renewed recognition, Keaton remained grounded, never seeking the grandeur or excess that often accompanied fame. His modest burial arrangements reflected this same simplicity, with no elaborate memorial or public spectacle. Keaton passed away from lung cancer on February 1, 1966, at the age of 70. Unaware of the severity of his illness, as his doctors chose not to inform him, Keaton continued working and living without the burden of knowing his time was limited. This decision allowed him to focus on his craft and his life until the very end. Buster Keaton's final resting place is a quiet tribute to a man who changed the face of comedy and filmmaking forever. His grave, understated and unassuming, mirrors the humility of a performer who let his work speak louder than words. Even in death, Keaton's legacy endures, inspiring generations of filmmakers and comedians who continue to marvel at his timeless artistry. Rita Hayworth. Rita Hayworth, the glamorous screen siren of Hollywood's golden age, left behind a legacy of beauty, talent, and resilience. When Hayworth passed away on May 14, 1987, at the age of 68, she was interred at Holy Cross Cemetery in Culver City, California. Her grave marker bears the inscription, "To yesterday's companionship and tomorrow's reunion," a simple yet poignant tribute to her life and legacy. Hayworth's final years were marked by her battle with Alzheimer's disease, which was diagnosed in 1980 after years of misdiagnosed symptoms that were attributed to alcoholism. Her struggle with the disease brought significant public attention to Alzheimer's, which was not widely understood at the time. Her daughter, Princess Yasmin Aga Khan, became a leading advocate for Alzheimer's research and awareness, using her mother's story to destigmatize the illness and raise funds for research. Hayworth's funeral was held at the Church of the Good Shepherd in Beverly Hills and was attended by over 500 mourners, including notable figures such as Glenn Ford, Ricardo Montalban, and Cesar Romero, who served as pallbearers. Despite her fame, the service and burial were relatively modest, reflecting the quieter life she embraced in her later years. Rita Hayworth's legacy extends far beyond her iconic roles in films like Gilda and CoverGirl. Her battle with Alzheimer's helped shine a light on a disease that affects millions, and her life continues to inspire admiration for her strength, grace, and enduring impact on Hollywood and beyond. Lon Chaney Sr. Lon Chaney Sr., the man of 1,000 faces, was a master of transformation, captivating audiences with his haunting performances in silent films like The Phantom of the Opera and The Hunchback of Notre Dame. But his final resting place holds a mystery that has puzzled fans for decades. When Chaney passed in the late summer of 1930, his ashes were interred in a crypt at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California. What makes this unusual is that his crypt remains unmarked to this day, blending into the rows of anonymous vaults. While the exact reason for this decision is unclear, it has fueled speculation about whether it was a personal choice or a family decision. Chaney was known for his intensely private nature, rarely giving interviews and avoiding the Hollywood spotlight outside of his work. This privacy extended to his death, but contrary to popular belief, his funeral was not a secretive affair. It included honorary pallbearers, a U.S. Marine Corps honor guard, and even the playing of Laugh, Clown, Laugh, a nod to one of his most famous roles. Despite this, the lack of a marked grave has led many to believe that Chaney wanted to maintain a sense of mystery even in death. Adding to the intrigue, Chaney's legacy was carried on by his son, Lon Chaney Jr., who became a horror icon in his own right. While Chaney Sr. avoided the trappings of fame, his son embraced the spotlight, immortalizing the family name in films like The Wolfman. The unmarked crypt of Lon Chaney Sr. remains a quiet enigma, a fitting tribute to a man who lived for transformation and left behind a legacy that continues to haunt the history of cinema. Joan Fontaine. Joan Fontaine, the Academy Award-winning star of Rebecca and Suspicion, left behind a legacy of elegance and talent, but her final wishes reflected a quiet and private side of her life. When she passed in December of 2013, her ashes were scattered in the Pacific Ocean near her home in Carmel, California. This serene choice aligned with her love for the coastal town where she had spent much of her later years, far from the glitz and chaos of Hollywood. Fontaine's life was often overshadowed by her infamous rivalry with her sister, Olivia de Havilland, another Hollywood legend. While their strained relationship was well documented, there is no evidence that her burial wishes were intended as a statement about their feud. However, the sisters remained estranged at the time of Fontaine's death, and her decision to have her ashes scattered ensured there would be no shared family burial site, a detail that has fueled speculation among fans. What many don't realize is that Fontaine's later years were marked by a deliberate retreat from the public eye. She lived quietly in Carmel, focusing on her passions for gardening, animals, and writing. The scattering of her ashes without a public ceremony was consistent with her preference for privacy, a stark contrast to the fame and adoration she experienced during her career. Joan Fontaine's final resting place in the vast Pacific Ocean reflects the quiet dignity with which she lived her later years. While her life was filled with the turbulence of fame and family tensions, her choice to rest in the open sea speaks to a woman who, in the end, found peace far from the spotlight. Douglas Fairbanks. Douglas Fairbanks, the dashing star of The Mark of Zorro and The Thief of Baghdad, was one of the most iconic figures of Hollywood's silent era. When he passed in December of 1939, Fairbanks was initially interred in a modest crypt at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California. However, this was not to be his final resting place. In 1941, his remains were exhumed and reinterred at Hollywood Forever Cemetery, where an elaborate memorial was constructed in his honor. The Douglas Fairbanks Memorial, a striking tribute to his legacy, features a marble sarcophagus surrounded by a reflecting pool and manicured gardens. This grand design was intended to reflect Fairbanks' larger-than-life persona and his status as one of the founding fathers of Hollywood. His widow, Sylvia Ashley, played a significant role in ensuring the memorial was built, creating a lasting monument to the man who helped define the golden age of cinema. What many don't realize is that Fairbanks' reinterment at Hollywood Forever Cemetery was a rare move for someone of his stature at the time. While Forest Lawn was considered the premier resting place for Hollywood's elite, the decision to relocate him to Hollywood Forever ensured that his legacy would be tied to the heart of the film industry. His epitaph, inscribed on the memorial, reads, "Good night, sweet prince, and flights of angels sing thee to thy rest," a line from Shakespeare's Hamlet that perfectly encapsulates his romantic and adventurous spirit. Fairbanks' final resting place remains one of the most visited and admired sites at Hollywood Forever Cemetery, a fitting tribute to a man who embodied the magic and grandeur of early Hollywood. His memorial stands as a testament to his enduring influence on the world of cinema. Ingrid Bergman. Ingrid Bergman, the legendary star of Casablanca and Notorious, left behind a legacy of grace and talent, but her final burial wishes revealed a deeply personal connection to her roots. When she passed away on August 29, 1982, her 67th birthday, Bergman requested that her ashes be divided between two meaningful locations. Half of her ashes were scattered at sea off the coast of Sweden, her homeland, while the other half was interred in Stockholm's northern cemetery, where her parents were buried. This decision reflected Bergman's lifelong connection to Sweden, despite her international fame and decades-long career in Hollywood and Europe. She had always maintained a strong bond with her homeland, and her burial arrangements ensured that she would remain tied to the country that shaped her early life. Her choice to scatter part of her ashes at sea also symbolized her love for nature and the freedom she often spoke of in interviews. Bergman's death came after a long and courageous battle with breast cancer, which she faced with remarkable strength. Even as her health declined, she continued to work, delivering a celebrated final performance in A Woman Called Golda, for which she won an Emmy posthumously. Her burial arrangements were understated and private, reflecting her personal nature and focus on family. Ingrid Bergman's final resting places, both in the waters of Sweden and in Stockholm's historic cemetery, serve as a testament to her dual identity as a global icon and a proud Swede. Her decision to divide her ashes was a unique and meaningful gesture, ensuring that her legacy would remain forever connected to the land and sea she cherished. Marlene Dietrich. Marlene Dietrich, the iconic star of The Blue Angel and Morocco, left behind a legacy of glamour and defiance, but her final burial wishes revealed a surprising connection to her roots. When she passed away on May 6, 1992, at the age of 90, Dietrich chose to be buried in Berlin, the city of her birth. This decision shocked many, as she had spent much of her life in self-imposed exile, renouncing Germany after openly opposing the Nazi regime during World War II. Her final resting place is in a modest cemetery in Berlin's Friedenau district, where she was laid to rest beside her mother. Despite her strained relationship with Germany, her burial in Berlin has been interpreted by some as a symbolic reconciliation with her homeland. However, Dietrich herself never publicly explained her decision, leaving it open to speculation. Her funeral was a private affair, attended by only a small group of family and close friends. The German government, which had once vilified her for her wartime stance, offered to hold a state funeral in her honor, but her family declined. Nevertheless, her death sparked a significant public response in Berlin, where fans gathered to pay their respects at her grave. Dietrich's grave is marked simply with her name, birth year, and death year, reflecting her understated wishes. To this day, admirers from around the world visit her final resting place, drawn by the mystique of a woman who defied convention and left an indelible mark on cinema and history. James Cagney. James Cagney, the legendary star of The Public Enemy and Yankee Doodle Dandy, was a man who valued simplicity and privacy, even as one of Hollywood's most celebrated actors. When he passed away on March 30, 1986, at the age of 86, Cagney was laid to rest at Gate of Heaven Cemetery in Hawthorne, New York. His final resting place is in the St. Francis of Assisi Mausoleum, a serene and dignified location befitting his legacy. Cagney spent much of his later years on his beloved farm in Stanfordville, New York, a 200-acre retreat where he indulged in his passions for painting, farming, and the quiet life. Despite his deep connection to the farm, he chose not to be buried there. Instead, his funeral was held at St. Francis de Sales Church in New York City, the same church where he had received his first communion as a child. The service was private, attended by close family and friends, but hundreds of fans gathered outside to pay their respects to the man who had become a symbol of American cinema. Cagney's funeral was a poignant affair, with notable figures such as Ralph Bellamy and Mikhail Baryshnikov serving as pallbearers. His burial at Gate of Heaven Cemetery reflects his understated nature, far removed from the glitz of Hollywood. To this day, his mausoleum remains a quiet tribute to a man who, despite his fame, always stayed true to his roots. Cagney's legacy endures not only through his iconic performances, but also through the simplicity and dignity with which he lived his life. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and comment. Also, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell to get notified of our newest videos. Thanks for watching.